In September 1942, the Boeing company scheduled the first test flight of its new B-29 bomber. However, it was not until early 1944 that the Army Air Forces received the aircraft for use against Japan. The B-29, or Superfortress as it was called, was designed to operate faster, at higher altitudes, and with a heavier bomb load than its predecessor, the B-17 Flying Fortress. High-tech weapons. Considered the world's most advanced bomber, the B-29 had a pressurized cabin, remote-controlled weapons emplacements, and a 200-horsepower engine, the most powerful piston engine of its time. Capable of flying over 3,000 miles for up to 16 hours, this bomber was the aircraft the Allies needed to attack Japan. As Robert Rodenhouse, a B-29 pilot, recalled, "The plane amazed me, first of all its size and then its capabilities. And to think that they could take an airplane, a bomber, and apply pressure so that we could feel the same thing at sea level as we felt at high altitudes, 30,000 feet. And that's basically what they did. And then when I found out the range it was capable of, and the weight and the bomb load, I couldn't wait to get behind the wheel." In April 1944, the American Joint Chiefs of Staff approved a plan they codenamed Matterhorn. B-29 bombers will attack Japan from China. On their first mission on June 14, 1944, 60 B-29s attacked an iron and steel factory on the Japanese island of Kyushu, but were unsuccessful. Enemy attacks on bases and long-range refueling would disrupt the program in China. Trial and error in the Marianas. The first B-29s arrived in the Mariana Islands in October 1944. This base was closer to Japan, but bombing still had problems. The B-29 had been rushed into service without complete testing. The results weren't great, according to Rodenhouse. "We had difficulty even retracting the bomb bay door, and also the landing gear. The biggest problem was the engine overheating. And that was very important, because if the engine coughed or sputtered on takeoff, you would never make it. You would never land. And the plane was so overloaded that it would never be able to stop with normal braking." Lots of risks. The plane was difficult to control. The heavy bomb load made takeoff risky. Flying 3,000 miles round trip to Japan over hostile waters made an emergency landing nearly impossible. However, perhaps the most confusing problem for flight crews was something we know today as the jet stream. If we went with the jet stream, our bombs would go over the target. And if we went against it, the bombs would miss the target. And it wasn't until after about 3 or 4 missions that some meteorologists came with the bombing group, and they determined what it was. The jet stream, Rodenhouse recalled. This is a very common occurrence now. It's in every meteorological broadcast today where the jet stream is and how fast it is and where it's going. It has an effect on the weather system, and we don't know about it. Low-altitude strategy. In January 1945, General Curtis LeMay arrived in the Mariana Islands to take command of the troubled B-29s. For 2 months, his crew flew the same high-altitude missions over Japan with little success. With his job on the line, General LeMay decided on a risky new strategy. His pilots would fly on line and dangerous bombing missions at altitudes as low as 5,000 feet, low enough to be within the range of anti-aircraft guns. Robert Rodenhouse was surprised. "We thought they could throw the kitchen sink up there and hit us. Can you imagine flying a big 4-engine bomber at 5,000 feet? That was completely unheard of, absolutely unheard of. And as the crew said, I think those generals are losing their minds. They're not thinking straight." Low-altitude bombing turned out to be very successful. The planes carried much larger bomb loads. The crew flew at night to avoid enemy fighters, and flight personnel are kept to a minimum. Most of the gunners were moved to make room for more incendiary bombs. Incendiary bomb. Incendiary bombs consist of gasoline infused with gelatin known as napalm. When an incendiary bomb hits a target, the napalm starts a fire that spreads quickly and is almost impossible to extinguish. Japanese cities were made mostly of wood and paper, so the resulting fires created hell. On March 10, 1945, flying in darkness at low altitude, more than 300 B-29s dropped nearly 250,000 incendiary bombs over Tokyo. LeMay's gamble worked. Perhaps as many as 100,000 Japanese were killed. Nearly 16 million square meters of the city were destroyed, and 1 million people were left homeless. Prisoners of war. Not all B-29 crews made it back safely to their bases. As prisoners of war in Japanese hands, some experienced indescribable suffering. In some cases, they were summarily executed, but in others, they were subjected to various forms of torture, including medical experimentation, beheading, cannibalism, and even being burned alive. One of the captured B-29s is on display at a zoo in Tokyo. It is not known exactly how many B-29 pilots crashed and were killed during the captivity, but the number was in the hundreds. The 1948 B-29 Waycross crash occurred on October 6, 1948, when an engine fire contributed to the crash of a Boeing B-29-100 BW Superfortress bomber at Waycross, Georgia. The aircraft was from the 3150th Electronics Squadron, United States Air Force, and had tail number 45, 21866. The crash occurred while climbing high from Robins Air Force Base and killed 9 of the 13 people on board, including 3 RCA engineers. 4 people parachuted to safety. Because the flight was a test of a Sunseeker, doubtful, discussed, a heat-seeking device later used in the AIM-9 Sidewinder missile, the federal government asserted state secrets privilege to avoid having to provide Air Force accident reports and claims for damages by accident victims and their heirs, even though the device played no role in the incident itself and was not mentioned in the report. The $225,000 judgment against the government and the contractors' widows came as the government claimed that the crash report, as well as documents containing the statements of the surviving aircrew, could not be released without seriously compromising national security. However, the Supreme Court overturned the decision based on the state secrets privilege. Nevertheless, the Air Force agreed to pay an out-of-court settlement of $170,000. Decades later, declassified accident reports indicated that the cause was a fire and manifold depressurization on the number 1 engine, as well as an accidental plume on the number 4 engine, which had not been removed prior to the accident. The report indicated that the cause of the fire in engine 1 could not be determined, but was most likely caused by damage to the right exhaust collector ring. The report further stated that the fire may have been exacerbated by non-compliance with Technical Orders 0120 EJ-117 and 0120 EJ-178. The report concluded that the aircraft was not deemed safe to fly due to non-compliance with this order. A lawsuit resulted in reopening the case, claiming that the report's information about the cause was declassified and accusing the government of a cover-up, but the case was not reopened. The most famous B-29 is the Silverplate series. These planes were extensively modified to carry nuclear weapons. Serious consideration was given to using the British Lancaster bomber, as it required little modification. The most significant modification was the expansion of the bomb bay, allowing each aircraft to carry a thin man or fat man weapon. This Silverplate bomber differed from other B-29s then in service by having fuel injection and a reversible propeller. Additionally, to create a lighter aircraft, the B-29 Silverplate was stripped of all its weapons, except for those in the tail. Pilot Charles Sweeney credited the reversible propeller with saving Boxcar after making an emergency landing on Okinawa following the bombing of Nagasaki.